Our next speaker is Ángel Mas from ECOM. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know a little bit more about him, please go on the QR code so you will know exactly who that wonderful man is. He will speak us about Spain and what is the exact situation about Samidoun and Masar Badil in his land. Thank you, Ángel.
Thank you, Pat, and good afternoon. Stand before you today to expose a grave and growing threat to public security in Spain and to the well-being of its Jewish minority, but as well to the safety and democratic integrity of all European citizens. This is not an abstract concern. It is an urgent reality. The organization Samidoun, particularly its Spanish branch, which is one of the most active internationally, has well-documented ties to terrorism. Their objective is clear: to import the radical methods into Europe, in our case using Spain as a laboratory. So that's how radicalization spreads. It begins with words, it escalates to institutional discrimination, it leads to intimidation and violence, and it culminates in the glorification of terrorism and a call to action. What makes this situation even more alarming is that figures from Spanish political left, including government-affiliated parties like Sumar and Podemos, are actively supporting these extremist networks. In the context of Spain having become a safe haven for Islamist extremists, we have to say that since 2015, the Spanish government, the current Spanish government, has provided a protective umbrella for groups like Samidoun. This has allowed BDS campaigns being launched from public institutions, campaigns that discriminated individuals, citizens, simply for the reason of being associated with the State of Israel. The creations as a result of spaces free of Israeli apartheid, in effect, no-go zones for Jews in our own countries, in municipalities, in regions in Spain, and a systematic effort to normalize extremist rhetoric under the guise of activism. Spanish courts, including the Supreme Court, have declared these BDS institutional discriminatory practices as illegal in over 70 rulings. Remember, these discriminatory practices were driven, were inspired, were mandated from local and regional governments in Spain. Yet, the promoters continue with impunity and have become ever more violent. What began as an economic and political boycott has now evolved into a radicalized network that openly advocates terrorism, all while receiving government protection and, in some cases, government subsidies. Who are the architects of this radicalized Palestinian activism in Spain? Well, I can name names. I can expose individuals behind this network, people that are directly linked with terrorism. I will name a few. Khaldi Abu Bakr, founder of Samidoun in Spain in 2020. She has ties to Ahora Madrid, which is part of the governing majority in Spain, part of Sanchez's government. Liliana Cordova, arrested in 1978 in Haifa for harboring a PFLP terrorist. Daniel Lobato, co-founder of Unadicum, a group that is openly anti-Semitic yet receives millions of euros in public subsidies despite promoting that violent ideology. He was also a correspondent for Hispan TV. Hispan TV is Iran's Iran's propaganda channel in the Spanish-speaking world, who was also an employee of Hispan's TV, Pablo Iglesias, then vice president of the government of President Sanchez. And all the members of his party were also employees of Hispan TV. And Podemos was, as a result, funded with the Islamic Republic of Iran's money. And that was the way Iran meddled into Spanish politics, quite directly. Manuel Pineda, well known in this house, former member of the European Parliament for Unidos Podemos, part of the governing legislative majority of President Sanchez, an activist in Gaza with direct ties to Hamas, Judith Rodriguez, Samidoun's representative in Lebanon, with links with PFLP and Lions Den. Maheb Dipsy, oh, this is a good one, European representative of the PFLP, self-admitted, a terrorist organization in Spain, yet he moves, not only he moves freely in Spain, he moves freely under the protection of the Spanish government, and he participates in events organized by parties that form the majority, parliamentary majority of President Sanchez. Musa al-Basir, arrested in Israel for attempted assassination as part of the PFLP. Baha al-Khattab, that operated tunnels in Gaza. All these are the Samidoun and Masar Badil activists in Spain under the protection of the government and its left-wing allies. Samidoun and Masar Badil, are we talking the same? It's a coordinated terror network. We can speak about Samidoun, we should speak about Masar Badil, because it's critical to understand that Samidoun is not an isolated entity. It is part of this alternative Palestinian revolutionary path movement linked with Masar Badil. Masar Badil does not just support violence, it explicitly calls for the destruction of Israel and the exportation of terrorism to Europe. Samidoun serves as Masar Badil's operational arm in Europe, recruiting followers and spreading their ideology. Their leaders, like this Khaldia Abu Bakr, ensure that Masar Badil's radical agenda translates into real-world actions. This is Masar Badil in their own words. We must commemorate the glorious October 7 as a victory for our people and the resistance. Palestinians have the absolute right to resist by any means necessary, including armed struggle. And the open glorification of terrorism, this open glorification of terrorism, directly violates the Spanish Penal Code. Yet, it continues happening. There's a direct call to violence in Spain going on. And this is not just online rhetoric. It is being actively promoted in Spain's streets and institutions, and it threatens not only Jewish communities, but also the broader Spanish population. In October 7th, something horrible happened. As it was happening, members of the Spanish government were glorifying online what was happening. They were glorifying the so-called Palestinian resistance online, real-time, as the videos were coming up of the massacres. Masar Badil published a statement celebrating the massacre. Yes, in October 10th, they justified the kidnapping of Israeli civilians, including babies, calling it the detention of settlers. But also in the streets of Spain, in October 9th, 2 days after October 7th, a pro-terrorist rally in Madrid, in Puerta del Sol, was authorized by the Minister of the Interior, with open glorification of the atrocities. In October 29th, another government-approved demonstration included statements such as, We unconditionally support armed resistance. If Palestinians want to kidnap Israeli settlers, they must do it. It is their right. On January 27th, last year, Samidoun's Judith Rodriguez publicly called October 7th a historic milestone, labeling Gaza the largest extermination camp of our era. She also personally targeted my friend and colleague, David Hatchwell. David is a leader of Spanish Jewish community. He has been for a number of years. He's also co-founder of ACOM. While this leader of Samidoun called him a mafia criminal, and she explicitly said that he was complicit of genocide in Gaza. You know what that means when a person with direct personal links to terrorist organizations that have acted on European soil does that? Names you publicly like that? Do we need to wait for something to happen here? It also happened in university. On February of year 23, Samidoun Spain leaders attempted to lynch the Israeli ambassador at Complutense University in Madrid. All these characters I've mentioned to you, they were there. The security detail of the Israeli ambassador had to draw their regulatory weapons to protect the ambassador from being lynched in a public university in Spain. In June 3rd, 24, Khaldi Abu Bakr, after all this, was invited into Spanish parliament by members of the governing majority in Spain. And she said, Israel has no right to exist. She defended Hamas as a guerrilla movement and rejected nonviolent struggle. So what's going on? What are the courts of justice doing? Well, Spain's judicial system is failing clearly to stop this growing threat. Judges currently lack the tools, probably, to do that. They cannot proactively dismantle extremist networks before they turn violent. Sanctioning organizations that glorify terrorism without waiting for an attack. Apparently, they cannot hold politicians accountable for supporting designated terrorist groups. But I insist, we cannot wait until words become bullets. The judiciary in Spain needs urgent reform, urgent tools to prevent incitement from turning into action. So this is why I'm here. I'm calling the European Parliament and the European institutions to support us on what the Spanish government under Pedro Sanchez is not only not supporting, but actually promoting. With political backing, these extremists have infiltrated Spanish institutions. They exploit our democracy to normalize violence, undermining the rule of law and endangering all citizens, not just the Jews, all citizens. And they are laying the groundwork for terrorism on European soil that could strike indiscriminately, as we have seen in past attacks inspired in these ideologies all across Europe, not only in Spain. I repeat, unfortunately, the Spanish government will not act because its own coalition members are complicit. So we urge the European Parliament to ban Samidoun, to outlaw Masar Badil as terrorist-affiliated organizations. We ask you to help empowering law enforcement and the judiciary to prosecute incitement before it leads to actual acts of violence. And we request your help to ensure that Europe does not become a safe haven for terror networks. This is a tragedy in the making. If we do not act now, I'm afraid we will soon ask ourselves why we did not prevent this next attack that could claim the lives of people across our communities. Thank you.
know for you, ladies and gentlemen, but I found this speech of Angel Mas very frightening. Thank you, Angel, for all these details and your research about who's who. What I take away of what you have said is, unfortunately, I had written down whilst we were speaking, and I was thinking to myself, is law the answer? But obviously, it's not enough anymore, because we know that our judges can take decisions that are not going in the right direction. We have the same in Belgium for other issues, but when you go to court, you never know what's going to be the output. So you said that Spain has a lack of tools, but at least if they could apply the law that exists, maybe the laxism would be less. But I hope we will have a discussion afterwards and that somebody will have good ideas to answer this.